Time now for our news review, where we take you through the morning papers. Today I'm joined by Zoe Grunwald, Westminster editor of The Lead, and author and broadcaster Emma Wolfe. So very good morning to both of you. So we're going to dive straight in. Emma, you picked out the main story on the Daily Telegraph to kick us off, and this is more of the fallout from the data breach that we learnt about this week after the super injunction was lifted, which had prevented any knowledge or reporting of it. And what is the Daily Telegraph's take today?
Daily Telegraph, well, obviously this was a huge data breach, one of the most damaging kind of immigration cover-ups in history, really, in British history anyway. Absolutely astonishing, this revelation that a list of 19,000 Afghans was wrongly shared by a defence official in 2022. But it now seems that the number of Afghans that may have come to this country, the average Afghan who claimed or worked with or alongside the armed forces or claimed to have done so or was on this list, the average person brought about 8 family members, but some were bringing up to 22 family members, 22 relatives with them. Many of these relatives had actually already been denied asylum. So they had applied for asylum in this country and they had been turned down for various reasons, but sometimes for security reasons. So it's one of these, I think it's one of these stories that's just going to keep on giving. And well, that sounds wrong, but it's just there's going more and more and more is going to come out. But I think the security aspect is also incredibly worrying, that people who had been denied asylum in this country were brought over as part of the resettlement scheme.
Well, yes. Perhaps questions over that there will be some people that say that, that the danger to family members may well have been very real, and that could be extended family. The perception might be that
very extended family
was in the... Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people... This is an Afghan migrant brings 22 relatives. But you were saying that...
The average person brought over around 8 family members, but many were in the upper teens, so it really is... It does seem like a significant amount of people.
What do you make of that, Zoe?
I mean, it is a significant amount of people, but it really gets to the core of the issue, which was this was a huge data breach that put thousands of people's lives at risk. I mean, the Taliban is an incredibly dangerous, bloodthirsty regime, and having a list like that potentially be made public obviously carries huge implications for the people on that list and their family members. Emma's absolutely right to say that this is going to continue to develop, and we're going to see, I'm sure, more horrific stories of people who not only had their lives put at risk, but weren't aware that this breach had even happened in the first place. And you can understand why, in the beginning, there might have been a need for some kind of super injunction, some kind of quiet around it while they tried to contain what had happened. But for this to have gone on for 2 years in Parliament and MPs and journalists not to have an opportunity to scrutinise this data breach and what it means for the country, what it means for the public purse, what it means for people's safety, I think is an extraordinary failure of the same.
And it's also astonishing. I mean, to get back to the basic point, the data breach itself was astonishing. The lack of security. A friend of mine is a cybersecurity expert who said, this couldn't happen in our company. It couldn't happen because the system wouldn't even allow that to be released. So I think we have to remember what a huge failure that was in terms of basic privacy and data kind of management. The system simply should not have allowed that to be released.
Yeah, so huge questions about security systems that were in place and the checks and balances that clearly weren't. But also the scrutiny question will keep being asked about whether or not even the Intelligence and Security Committee, where they have security clearance, don't they, and checks and balances on them, they weren't informed themselves. There was very little scrutiny. But Zoe, take us on to the Daily Mail, because they take a very different tack. They are looking at the risk that has apparently been posed to the people on the list, and they talk about revenge of the Taliban. They talk about a killing spree.
Yeah, so this is exactly the point I was making before. So earlier, I think when this story first broke in the week, there was a suggestion from potentially parliamentarians, from journalists, that they hadn't had any sense that anyone had actually had their lives taken or been put at risk because of this list directly. So although people were put at risk, they weren't sure that the Taliban was aware of the list. There was no suggestion at that point that there was any kind of retributive killings. Now, the Mail is reporting that one man was shot by a gunman as he stepped from an alley on Monday. One of 3 assassinations in the past 7 days, as Taliban warlords are on a killing spree against Afghans because of this data breach. Now, this is extraordinary. This really is putting into sharp focus just what danger this failing has put people in on the other side of the world, people who, helped the UK in what was a really serious, really intense military operation. That thousands have now received notifications from the government saying sorry, with the message saying, we understand this news may be concerning. Well, I would say it would be deeply concerning. There are going to be thousands of people who are now worried that their lives are at risk, their family members' lives are at risk. And obviously the route that was opened up to allow Afghans in has now been closed. So this is going to place pressure on the government to think about whether they want to set up another safe and legal route if this is going on.
Yeah, as you say, Emma, we're going to hear more about this, aren't we? And potentially more about further steps to bring more people in. OK, let's move on to other issues. And the front page of The Guardian goes with an interview they've done with Angela Rayner. So I know you were particularly looking at this, but talk us through what she said.
Yeah, so Rayner's basically trying to rally the troops. So we've just gone into summer recess. Obviously, there was that spate of suspensions earlier this week of Labour MPs who they said had been consistently defiant against the party whip. So, and it's been a difficult first year for the Labour government. I think it's safe to say morale in the Labour Party isn't particularly high. So Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, has urged Labour colleagues to step up and make the case for why the party should continue to be in power, rather than continuing to look look back at the numerous mistakes that have beset the government in the last year. So she's talking about infrastructure investment, how the payoff might not be seen in the short term, but those MPs need to make the case to constituents that they'll see it in the long term.
Well, yes, and it's difficult, isn't it, for them to feel too optimistic when the budget is looming, and a lot of people talking about tax rises, and this is something that Kemi Badenoch seems to be capitalising on. Front page of the Express, she talks about the Prime Minister's doom loop and the risk of more tax rises.
Yeah, so this is Kemi Badenoch hitting back, or trying to come out, punching after a bad, not great first year for Labour. Kemi Badenoch's trying to kind of, get some headlines, I suppose, get some focus back on the Conservative Party, because we spend a lot of time talking about Labour and Nigel Farage and reform. Kemi Badenoch is saying that Starmer's mishandling of the economy is having a toxic legacy for the next generation. She says we're stuck in a doom loop, which is increasing cost of living. She says we're definitely looking forward to more tax rises in the autumn budget. She said that Labour promised change, but it's changed for the worse. She obviously mentions pensioners, winter fuel, farmers' tax, inheritance tax, jobs tax on businesses. And her solution, unsurprisingly, is the Conservatives. She says, they would invest in small business. They would end this endless billions and billions of borrowing. They would reform the welfare system, which obviously Labour tried to do, have signally failed. So she's trying to set out a sort of positive vision. It's a big piece in the Express. Positive vision for the future, which I don't think anyone's going to be listening particularly, but I think Starmer needs to set out some kind of positive vision. People don't know where he's going.
Well, yes, and do you think that Kemi Badenoch will cut through at all? I mean, is it going to be hard to get that message over that the Tories are the one to be trusted on the economy when the perception is that they handed over a lot of problems to the Labour Party, which they're now trying to deal with?
Yeah, I think most voters probably aren't particularly impressed with Labour's progress thus far, but there is still an understanding that the inheritance that they received when they came into office was shockingly bad, and people still remember Liz Truss's mini budget and Rishi Sunak's inability to do anything, really. So I think that looms large in voters' minds. The problem with Kemi is she always seems to be 2 steps behind Nigel Farage when it comes to her attack lines, and all this stuff that she's setting out in the Express, we've heard it from Reform and we've heard it from Kemi Badenoch in the chamber. Nobody really thinks she's ahead of.
One moment you're deciding between custard creams and bourbons, and the next, you're a millionaire. Get yourself in the draw. Lotto, will you be the next millionaire?
Wrong, but if you aren't presenting a really clear case of what you do as an alternative, it's quite difficult. So no, I don't think this is particularly going to cut through, but I think any Conservative leader would have had a difficult time making the case that they should be trusted again.
We've only got a minute, but I thought we would leap ahead and talk about restaurants. Apparently, dangling discounts is the headline in the FT for late diners because people are going to bed early.
People are going to bed early. Zoe was making me laugh. She said, well, who eats dinner at 5 o'clock? And I was thinking, no, exactly. We were saying, do you prefer to eat before?
In the morning?
Me. when you have a 4-year-old, you either eat with them at 5 or you don't eat with them, and then that's a bit mean. Or if you go to the theatre, do you eat before at 5 o'clock? I mean, Americans eat very early. You'll meet for dinner at 5, you'll eat dinner at sort of 5:36 with Americans. But I think us Brits and Europeans have a lovely late dinner, don't they? They like to eat at like 9, 10.
I mean, I think there are a few trends driving this, not least that people are just a bit more health conscious, people have less money, so they're tending to eat earlier, spend a bit less. But I think ultimately, also, we need to look at restaurants closing early.
Yeah, we do. We haven't got time now. Well, maybe we'll look at it in the next hour. You will be back. Thanks very much indeed for that.
I'm Stephen Murphy.